that in the end of the day, we win. Truth always wins. God is on the side of the truth. And when you keep preaching, keep speaking about the truth, eventually the lie will crumble. Because you see, lie needs to be supported by manipulation, misinformation, more lies. But the truth is like a pillar. It stands on its own. And that was the message. With God, we win. With God, we win. And it scared the government to a point that they kept sending officers to arrest us. And then the truck convoy came. And because during that time, I already spent 4 months in the United States, hanging around with the most amazing, most brilliant minds on earth. I hang around with biologists, scientists, biologists, doctors, real doctors. I learned a lot. And I asked them, every single time I had an opportunity to talk to someone smart, I would ask them, Doctor, tell me the truth. What is going to happen when people will keep injecting themselves with this experimental thing? I'll tell you, the answers, if it comes to timing, were a little bit different. Some said, Art, people are going to die. Millions are going to die within 3 years. Some said within 5 years. But that was the difference. But every single biologist, doctor, scientist that I asked that question to, and I spent 4 months with those people, every single one of them said millions of people are going to die because of this. And that's what we're seeing right now, left and right. People are dropping dead that we have never seen before. People in the planes, pilots are dying like flies, hundreds of them. We have never seen something like this before. And of course, I don't know if those names mean anything to you, but I did tours with Paul Alexander and Hodgkinson and Mackey's. Those are the doctors that are experts in their own fields. And for example, Hodgkinson is one of the top pathologists in the country. And they said, we have never seen a human body after that the way we see it now. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. We've never seen something like this in a history. There's nothing in the books that we can relate to. It's crazy, crazy stuff. So they were right. It's like Paul Alexander always says, the tracker was always right. So they called me and they said, at that time I was called Canada's pastor, freedom pastor, because I was yapping and yelling and screaming everywhere I could, to warn Canadians that communism, socialism, fascism is already here. And when the truckers called me and they said, Pastor, would you come and do a church service for the truckers? We're coming from British Columbia, we're coming from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and we're going to stop in Calgary. Would you come and would you feed us? Because they know that's what we do. We feed thousands of people. And I said, of course. They didn't have to ask me twice. My wife prepared meal, got the volunteers. We had truckloads of food for the truckers, and I delivered a sermon to the people. It was late night during that day, and then they asked me to do it again early in the morning, just before they went to Ottawa. And I have to tell you, I wanted to go with them. I really wanted to go with them, and I struggled. I remember one day I was walking back and forth, and they didn't reach Ottawa yet, and I said, I want to go there. I'm buying a ticket and going. But my wife, thank you, Jesus, for wives. And by the way, to the younger generation, I want to tell you, can I educate you just a little bit? So learn this while you're young. It will save your life. When you get married, the last thing you need is an enemy in your own bed. Because my young man, when you close your eyes, you have no idea what can happen to you. Learn that. And you will have a very long and successful and happy life. So my wife, God has given me my wife for a number of reasons. But one of them is this: she's a lot smarter than me. So when I just want to go, she says, okay, so you go and everyone will go to Ottawa. Who's going to do the rallies here? Who's going to give people hope here? Who's going to stand up against those Nazis here? Some people have to stay behind. So I said, okay, fine. So I traveled around and I was speaking at different rallies, and then the Milk River came. Milk River and Coutts is the border between Alberta and Montana. And I received a phone call, and they said people are getting really depressed. There are police officers with machine guns, and they are pointing those guns at children when they are playing street hockey. This is a really, really bad situation. Pastor, would you come and do a church service in Milk River? So I did. I went with my son Nathaniel and with a worshiper to Milk River, and we delivered a church service. We had Lord's Supper. We were singing hymns, national anthem. Our CMP was there. The roads were open when we came. The roads were open when we left. The only people that were blocking anything were the police officers. There was a blockage over there. No one could come to Coutts. And when I finished and they recorded me, they took pictures, I asked them if they would let me go to Coutts. And they said, sure. And they opened the barricade for us to go to Coutts. So I delivered a second service in Coutts, Lord's Supper, singing hymns for about an hour, prayer, and then we had a dinner together. They showed me all around. There were no guns. There was no talk of violence. Quite opposite. The only aggression that I saw was coming from officers when they were flexing their muscles with machine guns, trying to scare the kids and women. Here is what I saw in Milk River and in Coutts. I saw every color that there is. I saw people in their turbans. I saw Muslims. I saw Christians. I saw people feeding each other. I saw people crying with each other, hugging each other, loving each other. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen on this side, on the soil of Canada. It was absolutely beautiful. And then in Coutts was the same thing. It was all kinds of people there, and I delivered 19 minutes sermon to the truckers and to the farmers on a private property. During my sermon, I told Canadians, stand up for your God and state-given rights, but do it peacefully. No guns, no violence. Peacefully. Solidarity style movement. And again, because we are Polish immigrants, we have seen solidarity. We've seen the movement. We've seen the millions on the streets, and it was them. When they kept marching, when they paralyzed the tyrants of that time, when everything collapsed. And in 1989, Poland had its first and free democratic elections since the invasion of the Nazis in 1939. The Berlin Wall collapsed, Iron Curtain was broken, and Europe was freed. It was done peacefully. And that's what I said. And actually, if you watch the sermon, I have a solidarity hoodie on me, just to show that we just want to do the same thing. Mahatma Gandhi style, Martin Luther King Jr. civil rights style, peacefully. Non-compliance, just refusal to cooperate, just do not work for the tyrants, and it's over for the tyrants. I said to the people, what would they do if 1 million truckers would show up? If 1 million Albertans would just simply say no, what would they do? They don't have enough RCMP officers. They don't have enough soldiers. If we refuse to cooperate, if we refuse to work for them, it's over for the wannabe pharaohs. That's how you win, just like that. So, the message was well received, and we left. It was not a problem. No one stopped us. No one told us that, what we were doing was illegal. It was private property. I was delivering a speech supposed to be protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. It was a church service. A couple days later, my last rally, I think it was Okotoks or High River. We did the 20,000 people rally in Calgary on Saturday. Then we did another one in High River, I think it was. And during that time, I said something that scared them to their deaths. Here is what I said. I'm going to repeat it over and over again. Mark down their names. Write down their names. The officers that did this to you. The doctors that allowed the murder of the elderly in the hospitals. Mark down their names. Those monsters. The political operatives. The traitors. If I was your king, if for whatever reason you would want to have King Artur again, I would charge them with treason. Every single politician that did this to us should be charged with treason. And that's what I said. Remember their names. Because one day, if God wills it, we need to go back in time and charge those monsters for what they have done to our country, to our children. 2 days later, I stepped out of my house, and it was a total gong show. I felt, I think for the first time, and you got to remember I'm a professional criminal by now, I felt for the first time like Al Capone of Alberta, El Chapo of Calgary. There was RCMP officers, detectives, SWAT team with a special unit with cameras, undercover police, uniformed Calgary police officers. Later on, we learned that they were monitoring me for a week, coming in and going out of my home. I was arrested, interrogated by RCMP for hours, thrown in prison, stripped naked, isolation, solitary confinement. The next day, I think, was my biggest shocker. Of course, denied access to lawyers for 3 weeks. They denied me access to see my counselors. I was writing down what is happening to me. That was confiscated illegally. My Bibles were confiscated. Everything was taken. I was in isolation. But the next day was the biggest shocker when they put me in metal cages. A metal cage in Riemann, Calgary, Riemann, which is the third worst prison in so-called democratic countries, straight after Russian Swan, Black Swan, I think it's called, and then Max in Texas. Calgary, Alberta is the worst prison. It's horrible. It's crazy. They put me in metal cages. The cage was no bigger than this pulpit. When you sit, you cannot move. You have to sit, you're forced to sit, and you're suffocating. Like literally, you're dying in front of them. Why they did that, I have no idea. I was placed in 2 such devices. To this day, no one replied to us why. Then I was taken back to isolation, and I spent 45 days in solitary confinement. They would take me from one cell, and they would put me in another one. No water, no washroom, concrete. So I got my concrete treatment on a regular basis. During that time, my son, my wife, the church, my brother David, they staged the longest ongoing protest in a history of prisons in Canada. They were outside. I was on the inside. They were outside worshiping, preaching, exposing, doing live, talking, trying to get people to be aware what is going on. They were threatened with tickets. They got tickets. Some were arrested, but they did it for 45, 46 days. Every day I was there, they were outside fighting for my life. And they were truly fighting for my life. During that time, we were already told 5 different inmates testified to our lawyers that the guards were giving them incentives to murder me in jail, to severely beat me up. And that was going on for a while. I was so popular in jail. I mean, this is, I think, one of the weirdest part of the story, that wherever I showed up, the criminals recognized me. And they would say, oh, you're that pastor that gets arrested all the time, right? Yeah, guilty as charged. Well, you're my hero. And I had really huge support from the inmates. And they sent a petition to the director, and they said, if you will not allow this man to go out of the isolation, you're going to have a riot here. And then the next day I was released to have interactions with other inmates. After a long time, the only interaction I could have was through the window of the locked door. The moment I was being released for half an hour, every inmate in the entire unit was commanded to go in. I was considered the most dangerous terrorist in a country, not allowed to have any interactions with other inmates. So that was Calgary. And then what happened when I was released after that petition, I turned my entire unit into a church. I had every single prisoner sitting on my Bible studies and church services. Every single one of them. They were crying. They were coming for salvation. I remember when they were protesting, the truckers came. This fellow, if you saw him in the alley, you would be asking God for help. Tattoos everywhere, slashed face. He really, really looked tough. Gang member, and he comes to me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's it. I think it's my time to go. And he starts to cry. And he says, can you lead me to the Lord like you did with that other guy? Incredible. He would look at me when they were protesting. He comes to the window when I was locked because I was not allowed to see what was going on with them protesting on the outside. They moved me to another wing of that unit. And he comes to me crying. He says, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm looking at him, slashed here, tattoos everywhere, the whole face. And I want you to know, you restored my humanity. And I said, thank you, Jesus. Because on the inside, you want those types of guys to be your friends. Believe me. Trust me. I was so successful. God was doing miracles. Inmates were healed in jail during that time, and they were crying. I led them to the Lord, and I think that's what bothered the Riemann directors so much, because they came one day. I was ministering to one of the inmates, and they said, Pawlowski, you have a visitor. And it was weird. It was afternoon. It didn't make any sense. No one told me it's coming, and they led me to admission. The sheriffs were waiting over there, and they literally kidnapped me. Sheriffs kidnapped me from Calgary, and they moved me hundreds of kilometers to another city, to Edmonton, and I was placed shackled like animal. The penguin march? So I had privilege of marching like penguin many times, stripped naked in front of men and women. Those people don't care. And then I was placed in MaxPot. MaxPot in Edmonton is for the most dangerous terrorists in the country. I was placed over there in freezing conditions by myself in the entire unit. There was no other inmate in the entire MaxPot unit, which can host probably 100 inmates. Crazy, crazy stuff. It was then when I called my wife and I said, I don't think I'm coming home. I think they have intention to murder me. I'm freezing. I can't sleep. I'm shivering. It's minus 28 on the outside and it's cold on the inside. When I asked for a blanket, they were laughing and said, at least you got fresh air. No pillow. I said, they're intending to hurt me. I don't think I'm going to see you again. I said, call the lawyers, do something, talk to someone, I don't know, but I think this is going to be our goodbye. And our lawyers send a letter to the judge telling the judge what is happening, and that scared the Riemann Center, and I think that's what saved my life, because the next day the judge learned about what is happening to me, and they moved me from MaxPot, from the freezing conditions, to another unit. But I was happy. I was happy that I'm no longer there in isolation. I received a letter, I have it to this day, that I'm considered the most dangerous offender, and then I'm not even allowed to have a pen because, I'm so dangerous. And when they moved me to another unit, I saw people through the window, and I was so happy because in Calgary, they were giving us blue coveralls. We all look like Smurfs, lots of Smurfs everywhere. But in Edmonton, it was pink. So we were pink Smurfs, and I saw the pink moving. So I said, okay, thank God I will not be in isolation anymore. I will be out with other human beings. I can minister, I can talk. Maybe there's something to do. In Calgary, we were not allowed to do anything. Just sit in a cell, no chess, no checkers, no games, no visitors, nothing, zero. No ball to play, nothing. It's crazy. It was absolutely unbelievable. In Edmonton, they put me to that new unit, and it turned out, because I noticed those pink people were jumping up and down. And then some were walking in a circle, so I thought, that's weird. So I turned to the officers and I said, where am I? And they started to laugh, like it was some kind of a joke. They said, you are in a wild, wild west. I said, what that means? You're in a psych ward. So they placed me in a mental institution without the knowledge of the doctors, without the evaluation of the doctors, without the knowledge of the Alberta Health Services, which, as you know, is completely illegal. That's a Soviet-style way to deal with political dissidents. So I said, okay, now everything makes perfect sense. We are back in Russia. This is no longer free and democratic Canada. This is China. They put me in a cell with another inmate. He murdered his brother, his own brother, with a machete. And I walked in, and I think they wanted him to hurt me because he was schizophrenic and he saw things all the time. When I walked in, he had all kinds of pens and pencils. And I look at him and say, you know, I'm so dangerous, apparently, that I cannot have a pen. He said, oh, no problem, you can have mine. So that's how I got a pen and I could write again. And it was very interesting. The time in a psych ward was quite interesting because I didn't know how to relate. There was a challenge. Also, the way they behave is quite fascinating. For example, if you wanted to watch a movie, they had a TV over there. And in Calgary, we were not allowed to watch anything. In Edmonton, they had 2 TVs. And in a psych ward, you could watch movies. I said, oh, well, good. At least my time will go a little bit faster. So there is this good Hollywood movie starting, and I said, okay, at least 1.5 hours, it will kill the time. Because believe it or not, on the inside, your worst enemy is time. On the outside, your worst enemy is time. It's actually a fascinating concept that I noticed. So when we started watching TV, in psych ward, you only watch a movie for about 10 minutes. And then someone jumps and changes the channel. And I'm kind of like, okay, this is different than I'm used to to watch movies. And then we would watch another movie for 10 minutes. And then someone would jump and change the channel and we would watch the next movie. And then the next one. Being there for a week, I watched probably about 50 movies, 10 minutes each. And that's just how it was. And I could get angry about it, but I decided to just have fun with it. Also, the good thing in a psych ward was that there was chess and checkers. And believe it or not, I won every single time. That was good for my morale. That I was a champion in a psych ward if it comes to chess and checker. Their concentration span usually was a minute, and they were distracted. Or they would say, my head hurts, so I won by default many times. Playing soccer, you could play soccer over there as well, but only for a few minutes because they got tired, and that's just how it was. I met amazing people over there. One of the funniest stories was I'm sitting next to this guy. He's drawing some business plan. So I sat next to him. I was quite talented man. I said, what are you doing here? Well, I'm drawing my next business plan. I'm going to build a restaurant. Okay. And he looks at me and looks at the papers, and he looks at me, looks at the papers, and then suddenly says, aren't you that pastor that gets arrested all the time? I said, guilty as charged. And then he jumps and he yells for all to hear, you are my hero. You are my hero. And I look at him and I thought, God, is that a good thing or a bad thing that I'm a hero in a psych ward? Because I am undecided if it comes to this. When I was being transferred with other inmates. And every time I was being taken somewhere, people recognized me. And the favor I got from the inmates was absolutely phenomenal. And also some guards were coming to me and they said, we are believers. We pray for you. Don't quit. Don't give up. So that's 50 days. I was, last year, I got the invitation to see Donald Trump. And I was supposed to have a coffee for my birthday. 28th of March last year, I got invited to Mar-a-Lago to spend some time with Donald Trump. And I had my coffee with probably Bonaparte's and Donald Trump's as well, but in a psych ward. So that's where I spent my birthday last year, in a psych ward, sipping something that they were telling us it's coffee, but it had nothing to do with coffee. I don't know what it was to this day. It was the weirdest thing ever. Something. It was something, but we pretended it was coffee. 50 days I spent in prison, charged with inciting mischief, interfering with the crucial infrastructure under the Defense Act, which is eco-terrorism, and then breach of probation. During my trial, not one witness was called. It was just the script of my speech, my sermon, word by word. The Crown Prosecutor accused me of causing Canadian economy over $400 million worth of damages for that speech. He said, compared my speech to someone that is inciting murder, and compared the coups, what happened during that sermon, to Rwanda genocide. Imagine that. And said that Solidarity Movement was a violent uprising, was the coup. So 2 days, they were going back and forth, word by word, what I said, fighting with each other, what Mr. Pawlowski said when he said what he said. 2 days. A month and a half later, I was found guilty on all charges. And I'm the first Canadian in the history of this country to be found guilty on inciting mischief. What that means for you is that every time you say something that the government doesn't like, they might come and say, you incited mischief. In other words, you are encouraging someone to break the law, which is punishable with 10 years of imprisonment. So I'm facing right now 10 years. Also, I'm the first Canadian ever to be charged with this eco-terrorism, and now I am found guilty of eco-terrorism by delivering a church sermon, a 90-minute sermon in a private property, in a private setting to Canadians. And then automatically I was found guilty on not keeping my release order. August the 9th, I am to appear before the judge, and then he's going to tell me what happens to me. He has 10 years at his disposal. So that's why we need you. Someone asked me to talk about the incentives. So here is what happened during this whole time. I was offered by the government of Alberta $2 million to stop doing what I'm doing. I was offered a land for the church. I was offered a very, very lucrative job within the government. They asked me to be the chair for the public inquiry in the province of Alberta, which Preston Manning took it, $250,000 a year. It's a very good job. And then I was offered a guaranteed seat at the legislature if I will cross the floor and stop talking about the government, stop talking about the politicians. Danielle Smith, we voted for her because she promised amnesty. She said that the moment I'm going to become the Premier of Alberta, all the COVID tickets will be wiped out. We have about 3,000 people like me that are still under the boots of this tyranny. And she says, I'll deal with that and all of this. I'll pass a bill that will free you all. She won, barely, but she did. And she backpedaled on everything. She did not keep her word. He actually threw us under the bus and refused to do anything. There was a lot of politics, a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, a lot of bribery, a lot of incentives that were coming my way if I stop doing what I'm doing. The latest one was a phone call that I received from political operatives. And here is what they said. If you withdraw yourself from the political realm, if you stop talking about this, we will let the charges go. You will be free. But you must promise that you will not talk anymore. So my reply to all of that was, well, I'm not for sale. I already told you that. I have been already bought by the precious blood of Jesus. Also, I am not a whore of Babylon. I don't cross floors like Danielle Smith when she abandoned us a few years before from Wild Rose to the Conservative Party. So now we're dealing with entities that are all the same. The NDP, the Liberals, and the so-called Conservatives. Either Danielle Smith or Pierre Poilievre, all of them are the same. They are moving towards the same agenda, the same goal. Where was Pierre Poilievre when we were bleeding on the streets of our cities? Where was he when we did the rallies? Well, he was nowhere to be found. The same with Danielle Smith. You got to remember, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We cannot allow them to do that to us. Because if we will, we are the dumbest of them all. They are flip-flopping liars. They will tell you what you want to hear, but they are not doing what they're promising. We must have our own entities. We have to engage ourselves in a political realm, because if we will not do it, they're going to finish us all. Truth is like a surgery. It hurts but cures. Lie is like a painkiller. It gives instant relief but has side effects forever. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of the pastors during the Nazi era, that paid with his own life in the end, said, "The test of the morality of a society is what it does for its children." We are facing very similar circumstances. I would say we are in the early of the 30s in Nazi Germany, and they're taking. They're taking our rights, but not just our rights. They're after our children right now and their children. So now we are being forced to make a stand. Either we will push this great evil away, or we will bow to it, and our children will pay the ultimate price. Because don't kid yourself. When they say you will own nothing, you will be eating crickets, riding a bicycle, when they tell you there's too many people, we need to remove few billions of you useless eaters out of this earth, they mean it. They're not joking. They're not joking. The experimental drug that they injected us with, I mean, those that took it, I didn't take it, my family didn't took it, and I'll die fighting. And that was one of my fears in prison, that they're going to forcefully try to inject me, and then some of them would die. I'll fight to the death if that was to happen, and probably I would not come out alive out of this ordeal. But thank God, he protected me through this whole thing. August the 9th, he's going to be rendering his sentencing, and here's what we need from you. If you can call the office of the premier, if you can call the office of the justice minister and put political pressure. The one thing that they hate the most, or they're terrified the most, is exposure. They love to do their dirty things in shadows, when no one is watching, when no one knows. When the fixers, the political people called me, they said, if you withdraw yourself, we will deal with the charges. You will be free. I said no. So the next phone call I received was, pack your stuff. The judge was ordered to lock you up. So that's the last message I received from the politicians. You're going back to prison. Because if you don't play their game, if you're not bowing before the pharaohs, then they want to make an example out of you. But God, and mark my words, God is making an example out of them. We are lions. Our God is a lion from the tribe of Judah. We are lions and lionesses, and we do not bow before the hyenas. We eat them for breakfast. That's why I'm getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I have been eating very well in this country. So don't lose hope. Stand up. I want to ask my son to come. He's going to share a little bit as well, because here is what we're missing. We're missing the young generation to speak. We desperately need the youngsters to engage, because now they feel like they have been tossed aside, either indoctrination or they are not welcomed or needed. You're too young, you're too foolish yet. wait your turn. No, we need all of us, the young, the women, men, elderly. Everyone is desperately needed at this moment because because we are fighting with tyrants. Because we are fighting with tyrants that are after our elderly. They're murdering them left and right, and they're after, of course, all of us and the children as well. This whole sick ideology, this perversion, the grooming, the pedophilia you see left and right, it has one purpose and one purpose only, is to hurt them, eliminate them, weaken them, pervert them, so they will not be able to live a normal life. We must, as parents, stand up, rise up. I couldn't be more proud than I am as a father. My son was just arrested himself. Imagine a man like me having a son that gets in trouble. It gives me such a joy. It fills my heart with so much joy. He just got detained for opposing the grooming of the children, the drag queen story hour. He was charged with harassment. He was charged with some nonsense. We are going to raise the funds for the legal team. So if you can chip that as well. We're looking for the lawyers. And as you know, lawyers are crazy expensive. And we will keep fighting no matter what. We'll keep pushing. We're not for sale. And we will win. So Nathaniel Pawlowski.